I mean, now that you can put it in context, that opens up my eyes even more to what he was doing. Yeah.
He would take a bunch of different martial arts. He'd be like, oh, that works for this. Oh, that works for that. Like Wing Chun.
And that's how it should be.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, that should be the same thing with cultures. That's what religions were for the most part over time. It was taking the best qualities of the surrounding cultures, religions, and accumulating them into a master redacted religion that everybody can essentially
blueprint.
A blueprint for everybody to be able to relate to, essentially.
Absolutely.
Which all stems from the human condition, and we're all human, so it's not like they all fall too far from the same tree.
Yeah.
No matter what religion it is. But that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
I don't know if you know, there was a Chinese sprinter. He actually broke the record for like the first 40-meter time in a 100-meter dash. And he was in the race with Usain Bolt in the Olympics in 2008, I believe. I think it was 2008. And he got absolutely dusted. And typically it's like it's a well-known fact when it comes to sprinters. You have to have a certain type of body, where that's why usually the longer legs you have, like Usain Bolt, and then the shorter torso makes you a better sprinter.
Okay.
But Asians, they have a different body type like me, right? Like we're kind of evened out. And this Asian guy, like he trained so hard. There's like a video on it, and he like surpassed so many obstacles, and he reached that level that he thought and nobody thought he could ever reach.
Right.
And one of the things that blew my mind, I wanted to bring this up to you because I think you would appreciate it. He changed the leg that he started off on when he was like the leg that you start from when you're about to sprint.
Right.
He switched legs. And so he started training himself on his other leg starting. And what that did was it confused, or I guess there was so basically like muscle memory, from the way I understand it, there's a threshold that you can get to. And once you get to it, your muscle memory almost holds you back no matter how much you train. So what he did was kind of genius, and it blew my mind. And he switched legs in that simple detail of his routine, I guess, when it comes to actually sprinting. And by doing that, and now he was training his fast twitch muscles from that starting point, he was able to break through the threshold that he was originally at, and he became faster.
Yeah, so
that blew my mind.
Well, I'll tie it directly into the boxing. So when I train my clients, I'll always have them see, like, do you know what fighting stance you're in? Like, do you know whether you fight southpaw, orthodox, right hand forward?
I'm familiar with those. I don't know.
I'm saying, do you know which hand do you fight with in particular?
No, and that's why I need to train with you.
So someone so stay there real quick. Do some fucking shit, they push you, how you get your fight stance. So your left hand first. That's okay. So this left hand first. Let's go sit right here. That's how I teach everybody, by the way. Is I literally tell them, I'm like, stand up, let's go.
Yeah,
what's up?
It's natural.
Right. So you being left hand forward, there's a have you ever thought about why you went left hand forward instead of right hand forward?
I always think about stuff like that.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, so human beings, we didn't evolve to box each other, to fight each other like this. But the stance that you're in that orthodox is physically conducive for your backhand, your right hand, to throw objects. But as a punch, you're just throwing a punch, right?
Right.
So if I'm throwing my punch in that orthodox, it would be equivalent to the physics of throwing a spear, or like throwing a rock, or like throwing an object, right?
That makes sense.
And if you're left-handed, you would be left hand back because you'd be throwing it with your left hand. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Or you'd be throwing a back powerful punch with your left hand. Majority of right-handed people fight orthodox, which is left hand forward, right hand back, and left-handed people are southpaw, right hand forward, left hand back. So if I have somebody who's orthodox, I'll have them train for a couple weeks straight in their orthodox position, get them super comfortable and familiar in their orthodox, and out of nowhere, I'll switch it to the southpaw to force that muscle confusion.
You're a good trainer.
Dude, and then we go from that southpaw, they then have to reteach themselves, but now they at least have the physics in their foundation to understand how to teach themselves from this position, as opposed to me having to teach them from that original position. Twisting their back foot into their twos, stepping into their jab. They then can switch to the other stance, be a beginner again, but have the foundation of learning it in their original stance and could be more familiar when teaching themselves or getting better in that new unfamiliar position.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you explaining that, that's crazy because that's something explicit I teach to all of my clients, but even more explicitly the clients that want to get better at boxing. They want to get better at the sport, not just doing it for cardio. When they want to get better, I go, okay, let's get this skill. Let's push it past that threshold and switch it up on them to where they have to prove that they have mastered at least the understanding of what it is they're doing to such a degree that they can replicate it in an uncomfortable opposite stance.
Yeah, exactly. And that applies to a lot of sports if you think about
Basketball,
it. Everything,
dude.
right?
Basketball, I would teach. Chris Paul had a video on YouTube when I was like 14 of him shooting right-handed.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll do the same thing. I'll think about the movement of how I'm spinning the ball, about how it's releasing off my hand, everything, but with my left hand.
Yeah.
And by doing that same thing when you're dribbling with that same intention, right hand, left hand. And then you develop that fluidity from an ambidextrous standpoint to be able to throw orthodox or throw southpaw or orthodox or shoot a basketball right-handed or shoot a basketball left-handed. Or the Chinese man off the blocks being able to go off the right foot or the left foot, depending on which one he finally broke the records or beat that threshold in.
Yeah, I love that. And this actually reminds me of something interesting too. I was one of my favorite moments from a Bruce Lee interview, and it was actually the famous interview where he brings up "be like water" and stuff like that. But it's funny to me, there was like so many other interesting parts in there that aren't really highlighted, and one of them, he speaks about how to honestly express your body and like express yourself. And he says this is a lot harder than people think. And when he says that, what he's trying to say, when you think you do it, when you think you are. And the way I relate this is I tell people to look at animals, because animals follow their instincts. There's no
rational cognition.
Yeah, there's no excess in their minds, right?
Right.
They're just going based off of instinct. So when you think about it, if we really did get in tune with our intuition and our, what's the word I'm trying to find? Your reflexes or whatever emotion or energy that your brain, your lizard brain, is telling you at this present moment, you instantly do it, just like an animal or like a cat would.
Is there anything in particular that you think of, like when you're referencing that? And
so, in my opinion, it's like if you just threw me out in the wild, or actually, you could put me in an urban environment like a city, and I would completely break free from all social constructs at that point in time. And if I wanted to run up a set of stairs immediately, I would just do it. If I wanted to sprint through a hall, I would just do it. If I wanted to creep and sneak through a room, I would just do it. If I wanted to sniff around, or I don't know, whatever, just weird stuff that people would consider extremely weird if they saw you doing it in society.
Beyond the confines of socialization.
Just doing it. And I think when Bruce Lee talked about it, he actually made fun of martial arts, because he's saying a lot of it was a lot of flash and a lot of cockiness. And he said this is all fabricated. If people really fought with martial arts or whatever, fighting, if you actually fought with your instinct, it just looks different than someone trying to make it look pretty.
I don't know if you are you familiar with Jeet Kune Do and like what his fighting style
Absolutely
was about?
Not, no.
So Jeet Kune Do was Bruce Lee's labeled fighting style that he adopted.
Is that like the...
Yeah, so just the way he fights, right? Yeah, I like that.
I love that stuff.
Like the way he fights.
Yeah.
The style is called Jeet Kune Do, but it was essentially, it was an amalgamation of all of the practical parts of different martial arts in one, expressed through the authenticity of whichever individual is practicing it. So Bruce Lee didn't think that like your Jeet Kune Do and my Jeet Kune Do were the same thing. We both practice Jeet Kune Do if we master our own unique martial art as an accumulation of all martial arts. And Bruce Lee was such a fervent believer of martial arts as a moldless form, like you're talking about. It wasn't bound by certain rules, flash, all this stuff. It was a boundless, moldless art, essentially. Bruce Lee believed if you were in a fight, you could gouge eyeballs, you could you could grab nut sacks. Like you should be more primitive, right? But again, Jeet Kune Do at that point wasn't an expressive martial art for competition per se. It was more so a lifestyle to get you from one form of non-expression to an ultimate form of ultimate expression, which is that individual form of you as a instinctual human tapping into the most unique version and part of yourself that in its most primal state, survival, fighting, using that martial art, being able to express it in its totality at its most, at survival at its most fittest. So that's what Jeet Kune Do was for Bruce Lee, essentially. And
so there's a method to the madness.
Well, I was going to say, and the idea of you talking about like being like water, being formless, like not having flash, like it all stems from this egoless perspective that at its heightened form, when you have to use that ego, you can still essentially survive and thrive no matter what society or nature throws at you.
Yes.
So, but yeah, that's dope that you fuck with Jeet Kune, or that you fuck with Bruce Lee.
Well, I mean, now that you can put it in context, that opens up my eyes even more to what he was doing. Yeah.
He would take a bunch of different martial arts. He'd be like, oh, that works for this. Oh, that works for that. Like Wing Chun.
And that's how it should be.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, that should be the same thing with cultures. That's what religions were for the most part over time. It was taking the best qualities of the surrounding cultures, religions, and accumulating them into a master redacted religion that everybody can essentially
blueprint.
A blueprint for everybody to be able to relate to, essentially.
Absolutely.
Which all stems from the human condition, and we're all human, so it's not like they all fall too far from the same tree.
Yeah.
No matter what religion it is. But that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Right.